chairs in, sit there, whatever. Somebody else.
Even the bars.
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
So we'll just jump into like the heady stuff and then back out of it and get simpler from there. But what do you think is the difference in the way not just lesbians but lesbian Mormons and gay Mormons interact with and experience and express and communicate about their experience of homosexuality? Because there seems to be this really subtle difference in my mind, at least. But it's so subtle I don't even get it. But it results in a very, very different experience. I don't know if it's just like a basic little gender difference or what it is. Like, you're one of the first lesbians that I've been able to talk to.
Right.
You're hard to find. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on that.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
then there's like gay Mormon men everywhere. You're like,
Yeah.
I know. You're gay and Mormon. Who isn't gay and Mormon?
Uh-huh.
You know, but lesbians is like harder to find and harder to sort of, not harder, but just a different way to communicate about it or
Right.
experience it. I don't, and maybe I'm making this up.
No, I don't think you're making it up at all.
So what is it? What's at play here? What's going on? What's different?
Really don't know. But
No, that's the wrong answer.
I know it's the wrong answer, but even in the support groups that I've run online for 17 years, there's a difference in men and women.
Mm-hmm.
The group for men, there are more than 300 participants, and for women, there are probably 50.
Wow.
And that's after 17 years.
Yeah.
And even the discussions they have are different. The men will talk about their, going to the gym and the things they see that trigger them, and women are more talking about the feelings they're having of being lonely and things like that. So it's always different. And I've wondered all these years if it's society makes women feel like they have to be able to handle their problems, so they're not going to talk about them. And especially in the LDS society, I think we're brought up to believe that if we go to Relief Society and do our visiting teaching and are righteous, then we shouldn't have any problems.
Right.
And so we're not going to talk about them. Even in Relief Society testimony meeting, not many people stand up and say, I'm really struggling with such and such.
Right.
All the testimonies are, this is how strengthened I am.
And how at peace I am.
Yeah. And nobody's really talking about what they struggle with. In the 8 years I've been in this ward, there was a woman who was teaching, and she admitted that she struggled since she was a teenager with smoking. And I thought, wow, nobody's going to admit that.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I've ever heard anybody say, I struggle with something in Relief Society.
Yeah.
Nobody says I struggle with pornography or masturbation or anything like that. You don't hear about that.
Right.
But I think in men's groups, they easily talk about those issues.
In those men's group, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I think that there's just some kind of, I don't know, society or church-wide idea that women have to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
And even
the
in the
supermom sort of syndrome. That's
and even in
pervasive.
the groups, when they talk about their problems, they always apologize. I'm sorry I'm talking about this. And when they leave the group, they often say, I'm leaving because I can't be a support to someone else. Well, it's not what I'm here. That's not why the group is here. The group is here to support you.
Yeah.
And they really struggle with.
But the female role, especially within a Mormon context, is all about the caretaker, the nurturer, the provider of comfort and support. And so
And it's hard to
that's
admit
how they
that.
identify themselves. Interesting.
It's hard to admit you actually need the help.
Right.
And it's definitely hard to admit that you're not like everybody else.
Yeah.
Just a human condition.
Wow. It's so subtle.
And I wonder, do men sit in priesthood and say, if you really knew me, you wouldn't really be accepting me?
No.
Women say that all the time. And not just...
Men think it.
Right, but women, that's one of the common complaints is, if they really knew me, if they really knew what I struggled with, and they just feel so different from their Relief Society sisters when, I don't know if they need to, but they do. And they're just the way women view themselves and each other. I think they set themselves up for feeling like they're a failure.
Wow.
And who wants to admit they're a failure?
Exactly, especially in the context of sort of the perfect Mormon,
Right.
imperative Yeah, and I've only lightly been introduced to how pervasive and real and intense the supermom syndrome really is within the Mormon context.
Mm-hmm.
Of women are expected to be so much, and yet when there is cognitive, emotional dissonance, or just, everything isn't going right, there's no outlet, I guess, for women to deal with that and talk about it and admit it. And
Right.
but somebody was explaining to me too, I think it was Joanna Brooks, was talking about, in many cases still, women don't really have a voice in the Mormon context.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain sort of marginalized place for the woman's voice, but really pervasively it is a patriarchal institution and organization and theology even. It's all patriarchal, and so
Right.
for a woman coming from that context where you don't really substantively have a voice
Right.
or a sense of empowerment given to you by your culture,
Mm-hmm.
supported by the culture,
Mhm.
then on top of it, all these expectations of perfection and being that sort of woman on a pedestal sort of
Right.
image, like that's pretty isolated. That's a pretty isolated image of a woman.
Yeah.
Wow. And then add on top of that an experience of sort of an alternative
Right.
sexual orientation experience.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Gets to be kind of difficult. It's easier to hide, and I think it's easier
Right.
for women to hide who deal with this issue, because it's common for women to hug and touch and even hold hands in a public scenario.
Yeah. And even have emotional relationships.
Right, and share deeply on some level.
Mm-hmm.
And so those needs get met in a way where they're not feeling so isolated, like
Mhm.
men probably do. They
So-
all sit in
Right.
the I'm not a homo chair in the middle.
Right. And
Women don't have
compartmentalize
that.
and-
Men don't. Women don't have that in Relief Society. They sit next to each other, and
right. Right.
so
And they're okay if they touch, or they'll
Yeah.
even hold hands, or
right.
which is maybe homosocial and even a little bit homotactile, but it's still not the full experience of being homosexual, which
No.
is obviously on
Yeah.
another level. But so, from what you're saying, could you or I extrapolate that out into saying there's probably a lot more Mormon lesbians than we sort of know of or have reported numbers of, or that are recognized because of all of those factors we just talked about?
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But they just don't have the voice. They don't have the power to do something about it. They don't feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
They get a little bit of it in a socially acceptable way anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
And I don't know if there are statistics, but it seems like women even come to their own realization later than men do.
right.
And I just think it's really frightening, I think, for women to come out and realize they're homosexual. And I don't know if it's
Yeah.
as frightening for men. It might be, but
Different ways, yeah.
Yeah.
The stakes are high, on a more exterior, superficial
Right.
level for men, whereas with women,
well, I
you're barely
think
given sexuality anyways.
Yeah.
You guys really
Exactly.
are just receptacles for our sexual urge.
you're
Just-
more likely
just so you
to
know.
you're more likely to be beaten, and I'm more likely to be ostracized. So.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So-
So then, with all that said, how was your process then of coming to a realization, like a complete realization? It's not just homosocial, homotactile. It's not just it's homosexual. It's right.
When-
If that's accurate.
It's accurate. I'm homosexual. There's my son right there. He woke up.
Morning.
This is Kendall.
How's it going?
I forgot this
Good.
dude's name. Starts
That's
with a D.
Derek.
Derek, and this is Roman.
Roman.
Mm.
We're just making a little movie. About you.
About you. So for me, I think I sometimes I feel stupid when I look back on all of my experiences and think, how could I not realize, But I had my first real feelings where I could say, wow, I'm feeling that for a girl when I was 17. But when I look back in history, I could see it earlier. And then I had my first sexual experience with a girl at 19. And then again at 20, a different girl. But I still thought it was just a phase.
Right.
And then I went to therapy, and I actually got sent home from the MTC because I thought I could go on a mission.
Yeah.
And got sent home from the MTC, and then
Why were you sent home?
because I had just left a relationship with a girl
Gosh.
to go to the MTC.
Yeah.
I really thought it was no big deal. Anyway, it was kind of ridiculous in retrospect, but
Because it became emotionally hard on you, or like
well,
church worthiness issue?
church worthiness issue. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't know what made me think I could serve a mission when I had just had a sexual experience with a woman at the time. You know, I was 20, 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have experiences again. I got married to a man, and I thought that I had gotten over it. In fact, I even went on the internet and told everybody that you could be cured if you have faith in Christ, and it's all better now. And then when I got...
I was just going to say, I wonder if it's easier for women to sort of think that or feel that too, because again, in the sexual experience, a heterosexual-ish experience, or esque, not to be too graphic, but you mostly just have to lay there,
Right.
right? I mean, if the guys get all satisfied, then you're like, oh, I don't...
Right. Buy a product and it works.
Right, yeah. And so you're like, oh, look, I'm cured, I'm here.
Right. And that probably works better for those who've not been sexually abused.
Yeah.
But I was.
Yeah. Oh,
and
okay.
so it was very difficult for
gosh.
my marriage.
Oh, gosh.
And then when I got cancer, that's when I realized that I was living my life according to all the precepts, you know, going to the temple, even though we lived in Iowa and the temple was 3 hours away and I had 3 babies. I went to the temple twice a month and served in my callings and read my scriptures, said my prayers, all those things. And then when I got cancer and I considered that I might die, I felt like I wasn't ready to meet him, and I didn't know why. I didn't know there was something in me that felt amiss.
Ready to meet God?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that was. I couldn't figure out what could that be if I'm doing all these things right, you know, trying my best. And so I was in the hospital, and my husband had come to see me. And then when he left, a few hours later, my neighbor came to see me, a woman, and I was more excited to see her than my husband. And I thought, oh, that's what's wrong.
Oh, wow.
And at first I thought it was wrong with me. Something was wrong with me.
Of course.
And so I tried mind behavior modification, which totally backfired, and went back to therapy, went to couples therapy with my husband to try to fix the issue. And of course it didn't happen. And then the cancer issue was very difficult for him. He was very helpful when I was pregnant and when I had young babies, but somehow cancer was very frightening for him.
Interesting.
And he kind of shut down. And at one point he told me he didn't love me anymore. And I think that was the end for me.
How did you feel about that, though? Because in some sense...
For him not loving me anymore?
Yeah.
Devastated.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because other people say, well, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're lesbian, so move on.
Well, I didn't want to be lesbian.
Right.
I wanted to be with him.
And there's still love.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was a man I trusted, which didn't happen very often. And when he told me he didn't love me, I was devastated. And that was in April of 95. And by November, or August, I had a girlfriend.
Wow.
So I don't think that's a coincidence. I just wanted to be loved by somebody.
Yeah. That's a hugely traumatic phase right there.
Well, there was
all
sorts of traumas.
Right.
Cancer, and my husband didn't love me anymore, and I had a miscarriage. I was 4 months along, and so it was pretty traumatic.
And then, your relationship with God and vis-a-vis your sexuality.
Right, because I thought there was something wrong with me, so I thought there was this separation that I wanted to fix and couldn't, and I prayed every day for it to be removed. And even one morning I was praying to have it removed from me, and it was like my thoughts stopped, like I couldn't go on in my prayer, and I wondered, why can't I think anymore? And I felt in my mind, you're praying for the wrong thing, because I was going to say, take this away from me. Yeah. And so I said, then what am I supposed to pray for? And I heard, pray to endure. And I just bawled. That is not what I wanted.
Enough of the enduring.
I didn't want to endure. I wanted it to be gone, taken from me, removed. Right. Yeah. And so when I realized it wasn't going to be removed, I wasn't sure where to go from there. Do I stay with my husband? Do I keep having affairs? Do I just go with a woman, or what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to stay with my husband, but women kept showing up, so
Yeah.
they got
Right.
problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And
And what was
after,
your husband thinking or feeling about the women part of it?
well, he was hurt, of course,
Mhm.
each time, and we'd try to fix things. And the last time I told him that I had been with somebody, he laughed and he said, "Of course you have," but by then, it was done. It was over, and
Yeah.
I didn't see any repairing the marriage.
Mm.
And then I would see him with other people, other women, just friends, and they'd laugh and talk and touch,
Mhm.
and then I realized that I don't touch him like that, and
Mhm.
that's probably not very fair.
Mm.
So that's when I suggested, after 10 years, that he should probably move on.
Wow.
And so he did.
Yeah.
And he got married 4 months after the divorce was final.
Wow. So somebody had already known? and
No,
sort of,
I think
or-
he met her. We separated in September. He met her in January, and they got married in June.
Boom.
Then we were divorced in February.
Wow.
So
There's probably a marked difference. I mean, obviously it's dependent on individuals and has nothing
Yeah.
to do with sexuality thing, but even just the sexuality component difference that he experienced,
yeah,
I'm guessing, between
yeah. I'm
two
sure
of
there's a
you
huge
and him
difference.
and her, and he's like, oh my gosh.
I know. Imagine what life could have been like all these 10 years.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and they're still together and still happy and have a kid. And
Wow, cool. How are you
Yeah.
guys?
he and I,
Yeah.
we don't talk.
Yeah, too
Um,
hard.
We tried to be friends, but with her, the introduction of her, it was difficult.
Right.
There's lots of issues with new marriage, and
Oh yeah.
by then he was pretty angry at me, and
Mm,
because I'd done some pretty
yeah.
mean things
It,
as far as my sexuality.
Well, but I was gonna say, and the understanding or growing in an understanding of the sexuality component didn't, because I've heard other stories where it's like, oh, I don't have to take it personally anymore because it's not like you're personally trying to hurt me or,
Right.
it's a matter of sexuality. If it just doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not a choice. That didn't.
Well, he
Help
tried
heal.
being that understanding for a
Mhm.
while, and there are times where he's like, "This isn't about me. I know that."
Mhm.
But still, when divorce comes, all sorts of
Yeah.
anger and
Yeah.
things come out. I was angry at him about money. He was angry at me about
Yeah.
women, and
Yeah.
so it got kind of ugly.
I'm sorry.
So we had to email about the kids, and now that they're older and can make their own decisions, we don't talk.
Wow. Oh.
It's better for us that way, but
Yeah.
the kids get to make their own decisions about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Which is good.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we're done. She just gave her whole story.
yeah, right. Like that was my whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
could
say,
tell
do you
were-
need the light on, that light on?